us, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Delighted to introduce to you another YouTuber from across the water in Sweden. I've been following this man now for quite some time, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation that we're about to have. Stefan, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. I'm very good, thank you, Rowan. Nice to be here.
Nice to meet you too. I've been following your YouTube streams, and I'm quite fascinated by just the matter of fact, the way you present that, and I find it quite refreshing, because we don't often get to hear what's going on in your country of Sweden, because there's a lot of misinformation going around, and I find you're a great source of information as to actually what's happening and what the mainstream media in Sweden and indeed your political class aren't telling your citizens over there. Can you just give me a quick background to you, how you started off quick broadcasting and pushing out your truth to where you are yesterday when we spoke about the great hand grenade, the attack that you suffered, or great explosion? But quickly, briefly, a quick snapshot of you and how you got into all of this yourself.
We started with the Brexit, actually, the campaign. Before there was a referendum, there was a campaign. And I started to become interested because two of my friends living in England were involved in the discussions. And I thought it was fascinating and they were so angry, and people were very upset. So I started to look into it. So I read the EU website because I realized I didn't know much about it, really. I didn't like the EU, but I didn't really know what it was. And then I realized it was a disaster, basically. And I decided to start talking about it. That's basically how I started. And then the election in the US came along, and I started doing videos regularly, and I got some good feedback, and now I can't stop.
Yeah, it's pretty much like myself. I just became disheartened with the FGMs that were happening over here in Ireland, and the conversation steering towards that we've built these two state-of-the-art FGM clinics in Ireland, but nothing about the children being sent away, having the FGM performed by witch doctors and coming back here. And we just had a children's referendum not so long ago, and there was nothing about the protection of children's rights because nobody was prosecuted. So it wasn't being deterred. But leading on to that, we both had a similar ascension into our current understandings and the way where I get to view what's going on in Sweden. From my vantage point, looking towards Sweden, when I first started paying attention, I noticed that your political class started instructing your police services to not report migrant crimes, and the sexual assaults and rape statistics were going off the chart. But we have people of whatever persuasion that aren't paying attention think that this is a conspiracy theory, that because of the open borders migration that's happened into your country, you're experiencing a level of near civil war, rapes, bombing attacks, civil disobedience, and it's not being reported. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, I think you are, actually. Yeah, there's been it's been really bad in Sweden for a long time, and I started to realize it more and more as I was looking into it. It's not just the criminal activities and the raping. What I think is the worst in Sweden is the silence that has been going on for so long, and how the establishment worked actively to silence people. It was like a setup, and it was like a strategy. Well, they wanted this. They wanted multiculturalism, and they wouldn't take any criticism about it.
Yeah.
So I think this has been the worst. So people had to work really hard to understand what was going on. And all these people now, more people have joined, of course, speaking up. They had to take this beating personally, just to speak.
Yeah.
So that's been, I think that's been the worst, because if people can't talk about it, there's no change.
There's no way to resolve it and come to an
Exactly.
understanding between two people and how to resolve the issue. It's just by ignoring it and suppressing the freedom of speech and the freedom to critique and to call out what they see as this isn't how a normal society operates. And these people.
Sorry, I lost you.
Oh, sorry, Stefan. I was just saying, the rule of law is not being applied, and our new visitors, our new guests, our new people that require our help are not conforming to the secular rule of law and respecting personal space and property rights, and don't seem to have a grasp of that. But our political class seem to be selling us out. Do you think there's an agenda behind that, or is this just the outcome of opening your free borders and allowing the free movements of the world to come into your country?
I think it's a definite agenda. This has been planned, because when I started to look into it, I realized the same thing is happening in so many other countries, and it's very similar. The strategy has been very similar. And I think the big realization I had the other day, actually, it's really up to us to inform the people, because nobody else will. So, and as we know about this, there comes this responsibility to educate and to tell the truth. So it's up to us, basically. You know, people like to blame. I'm sure you heard this in Ireland too. You blame the Irish, right?
Yeah.
For being naive or stupid or whatever, lazy.
Or not being woke enough, or sleepwalking into oblivion.
Exactly. But I think this is unfair. I do. Of course, you can say that the Swedes have been naive and so on, but really it was a strategy, and they were all in on it. The politicians, they had media, and they kept lying to the people. And you can blame the Swedes for trusting them, of course. This is a mistake to trust them, but that's what they did, and they were actually betrayed by these guys. So yeah, but now there is an awakening.
What is life like? Go ahead, sorry, Stefan. Go ahead. There is an awakening. I was going to ask, do you see more and more people getting motivated and activated and involved and speaking out?
Yes, I do. This is a very obvious trend, and the debate has changed a lot since a year and a half. So more and more people are speaking up, and those who carry out this agenda, they are actually pushed back these days in the debate, because there's so many. This is one person after the other starting to realize that there's something wrong, and that people have been fooled, and they start to realize the truth, basically. So it's an ongoing process, and it's up to us to carry this out. People who know the truth have a responsibility. I say this again, I can't stress this enough. We have a responsibility to educate, and that's what we are doing.
I believe you're very much correct in that assumption or that hypothesis, Stefan.
Thank you.
People, I don't know if you get sort of derided and attacked. People think you're crazy, or you're coming out with such this off the charts kind of information at times. It's only because you're paying attention to a different source of information, and you're critically thinking, you're understanding, and you're trying to change your position. Like I would have been kind of left leaning or socialist leaning, or I was kind of disinterested in politics. I kind of wanted, a safety catch for people and stuff like that. But when you see how that system has been abused and how detrimental it will be to societies to allow it to continue unregulated, because we're spending our children's and grandchildren's futures and their future wealth by writing and cashing checks now and over borrowing. Ireland is 250 billion and steadily climbing, looking to borrow a further 50 billion off Europe, when I firmly believe that there's a crash looming out at the end of this year, beginning of next year. But our political class are insistent that they're going to borrow 50 billion and bring another million migrants here. No background checks, no nothing, just going to facilitate it. And we can't even look after our own here. We've 10,000 homeless Irish on the streets. We have something like some saturation points of 50-50 demography charts in certain towns and countries. It's like places changing so rapidly. We have 20% foreign national in just 15 years, as opposed to 16% from the UK in 30 years of immigration. Do you have any stats or any things you could send on from Sweden that are comparable?
Well, it's mad, isn't it? Wow. Well, in Sweden, we accepted the big year was 2015.
Yeah.
When there was 163,000 asylum seekers. But we have a steady flow going on. We do. It's like, I don't have the numbers, really, but it hasn't stopped. It just slowed down a bit. But the government that we have, they are actually very soft.
Very socialist, very left-leaning, very...
Yeah, socialists, Greens.
Yeah. And it's a recipe for disaster because it just seems to acquiesce from one demand from the new immigrants to the next at the seemingly the cost of the indigenous society that's ruling there, that's had its traditions are having to change to conform for the new ideologies and multiculturalism that's pouring in. And I, like you, seem to say, and I want to talk and express that multiculturalism is failing. And the sooner we spread that message and tell these people, look, there is a different path. We can help numerous amounts of people, but at this altar of worship of GDP is not how a country should be run. It's society. It's societal. How shall I say? The normality of society that, you know, I just feel like we're bringing in cultures that are just completely antithetical to our way of life, and the sheer numbers and scales are starting to subsume us, and we're not paying attention to the early warnings or the early flag warnings, you know, to address these things, situations honestly. Like, you're getting hand grenade attacks. You've got no-go zones where police won't even enter. Is that true or false? Because it seems to be called out openly as false information.
It is true. The police themselves, they say that there are 61 of these no-go zones in Sweden, and it's growing. And some of them are really bad. And these are suburbs, basically, to major cities. And the police can't go in there without an escort.
Yeah.
And the fire brigade, they can be called to a fire and they won't go unless they have an escort. See, that's how bad it is. And some of these, you know, I used to live in Stockholm, and I used to work in some of these areas in the past, in the 80s, and I don't go there anymore. It's just not safe. So it's true, we do have them.
Isn't that a terrible thing to think in your own? I mean, we've always had bad elements, and you'd have kind of more suspect areas, but to have general near townships now, towns and housing estates that are practical, you cannot go down there and walk there as a free person without fear of assault or something else worse happening to you. My further understanding and paying attention is some of the Swedish women are now taken to either covering up their hair or dyeing their blonde hair black so as not to attract unwarranted attention. And can you speak to us about the situation in Malmo? I mean, Malmo seems to be completely taken over by all accounts.
Well, it's really bad in Malmo, let's say. Yeah, it's the worst place, to say it's been run by the socialists forever, and it's just bad. And they can't keep up with the welfare system anymore, so they have to get donations from the rest of the country just to support their citizens. And then you have the crimes, so on. Of course, there are areas still in Malmö where you can live a decent life.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a big town, but then there are areas where you shouldn't go, really. And sort of the Swedish establishment, the politicians, they have sort of accepted it. I think they realize that they can't handle it.
Do you think
they sort of they want the Swedes? It seems to me they want the Swedes to accept this new reality.
And just accept it and damn the societal consequences. Like you had the truck of peace in Sweden, and there was a lovely 11-year-old child that lost their life, and the outcry was short and brief, and there was thoughts and prayers and all that kind of. But it just seems to be progressively working without any change. We'll put up speed barriers to prevent trucks from going down roads now, and we'll curtail open celebrations of Christianity, or like that. Or we're noticing now more and more in Europe, anti-Semitism is growing in the rise. But where's it coming from? People won't be honest enough to call it out from where it is coming from. So coming up on the last few minutes, I want to keep it short and sweet, Stefan, because we're kind of limited on power. I've always maintained, and I think, and you suggested in one of your last videos there, that Sweden is slowly moving to a patriotic kind of nationalistic. You've heard certain politicians now start to speak the rhetoric of questioning open borders or questioning multiculturalism, but it's kind of like a toothless bear. Do you see any real nationalist, populist ideas parties forming in Sweden?
Well, there are two parties actually. One, the Nationalist Party, the Sweden Democrats. They are sane, I would say, and I voted for them in the European election lately. So, but I think Sweden is coming to this point where the citizens are starting to demand some justice.
Yeah.
And this is
the
very
equal application of the rule of law for all.
Yes. And some justice for these guys, these politicians, and media who lied to the people. It's coming to this point. I see this, and I think this is what we need right now. We need some actual justice. We need to see some people in court.
Yeah,
because of what they did.
Pretty much like what Iceland did. Like it jailed it burnt the bondholders. It jailed its politicians and bankers. And it's a thriving economy now, with a just by being honestly real and dealing with the crimes permitted by white collar crime and prosecuting them. But our country here in Ireland is so corrupt. We've got endless tribunals costing millions and millions. People openly know that the system is corrupt. The ballot box seems to be corrupt as well and not true. So we're getting politicians that openly destroyed a serving police officer's good reputation, proven to be false, but then just got elected to Europe, for openly being caught out on a lie. But the people, that's why I say that the ballot box was compromised. So we have to kind of win the culture war and get enough people invigorated and invoked enough to support a movement or a group of people that will say, look, we have an alternative here. We can help a lot of other people, but we need to maintain our borders and look after ourselves inside and kind of balance it out. And not just let the corporate governments from corporations override the pressing need of societal needs, like homelessness. Suicide is going through the roof. Our rape stats are starting to steadily climb and not being openly talked about and addressed because our mainstream media is suppressing free speech. Just on the last few comments there, Stefan, and I'll let you finish out the show. Just before you answer that, just remind people where they can find you and your YouTube channel and anything else you want to say to us while you're here.
Well, the channel is Sanity4Sweden. Yes, that's where you can find me on YouTube and on BitChute. Yeah, that's where it is. It's fun to do this. Yeah. I love doing it, and I love comments and people talking. A lot of bright people.
Are you in an isolated region of Sweden? Where are you in a main city? Do you get any attacks for speaking the way you speak, or any criticisms?
Yeah, I moved from Stockholm, the capital city of Sweden, to this farmhouse.
It looks perfect. I think that's going to be the solution for everyone. Find a bit of land and build a wall. I just want to be left alone. Yeah, do whatever you want. Just leave me alone. That's what I want from my government. Yeah, just crack on. Just leave me alone and stay out of my pockets.
Yeah. Well, it's
Okay.
nice here. It's nice here, so I like it.
Yeah, it sounds
And
fantastic.
I think it's beautiful what you're doing.
And you.
Very, very good. And I think it's good, to unite. And this is what we need worldwide. And that's one of the very positive things about having a YouTube channel and speaking out, is because you feel that you're getting to know so much people, bright people who are not afraid to speak up. And we see this change happening now. And it's thanks to people like us, people commenting, watching, sharing, talking. It's great to see this.
It's great. We have this new format where we're able to share, even though they're starting to censor us down and more accounts are being closed and demonetized, and they really are pushing it out now, but we won't stop, because other voices will come up around us and take up the culture. If we do get suppressed, or we do get pushed to the side, more and more people are taking that step and speaking out on their own platforms too.
Yeah, they will not be able to stop this. There is no way, unless they form police states all over the place.
Yeah, that's what they want. That is what they want, Stefan. Yes. We're going to keep this portion a little short, brief one, because our recording situation isn't at its optimum. I want to thank you very much for joining me and sharing your information about the comings and goings on in Sweden. We will do this again quickly in the future, and if any updates, we will touch in again and share some more information. Also, did you have a site or a location for that last broadcast where that citizen went himself and got all the court proceedings to prove the 4,000 cases and prove the statistics of openly prosecutable cases on the rape counts? Remember you did that?
Yeah, I do have a link. It's all in Swedish though, but I have a link to the actual report.
Can you forward it on to me, and I'll drop it into my Dropbox here. Regardless of it, we got translating, we got translations and all that kind of stuff. We can see the charts. We want to understand the information. So I'll stick that in the Dropbox if you could send that to me later on. Stefan, it was an absolute joy and a pleasure to meet you. I'm sorry for such a short, brief time, and we'll see you again on the next episode of the Grand Torino. Thanks very much.
Great talk. Thank you.